Right. So that was nice.
I got a short, small story actually about a peacock just from the other day. I was out on this little retreat space, and I went into the fitness room to do a bit of a workout. It was all closed off, and I walked in. There was a peacock sitting right on the bell bar handle, and I was like, "Oh!" It's kind of surprised me. I was like, "Hey, hello there," and started chatting to him a little bit, and I thought, "Oh, he's trapped in here because he was pooing, and he must have been a little bit scared and frightened." So I opened all the doors wide up. Kind of said, "It's okay, buddy," and kind of guided him, helped him out, and he just flew off, like, kind of flew out the window. And on his way out, he just dropped one of his big feathers for me, and I was like, "Oh, bless you, thank you so much." Thank you, Tomas.
Yeah, no, it's thank you, Tomas. It's good medicine, peacock medicine. Yeah, look it up. The archetypal spiritual representation of the peacock is quite the feat. Yeah. It's been my totem for a while, really.
I was gonna say, it reminded me so much of you. I thought, oh, he's here with me. So good. Yeah.
You know, how do we shift our mindset and our orientation out of this like programmed scarcity and lack and the need for control because we require security, and that keeps us very much in a mental headspace. And that's what I call programming. You know, that is our social economic model today, and it's entirely built on artificially created scarcity and lack that really helps the bigger businesses. You know, fear sells, love doesn't sell. There wouldn't be a single newspaper really currently active with what people are kind of programmed to be addicted to, if they all shifted everything towards positive prosperity news. If they actually started reflecting all the amazing human beings that are doing amazing things, and they started just totally not covering, you know, what Davos is up to with their financial reset fantasy globally, which basically, like, if we just let things get worse enough, people will actually want to reset. It's an entire globalist agenda. And what is underpinning the Western mindset is an entropic mindset. It's a lack and scarcity based mindset. And so what then is not that? Well, that's syntropy. And that is why I talk about syntropy being the missing link, because when we start, and it's interesting, through cult programming, we have never been taught anything about syntropy because it doesn't sell. If you teach younglings at school, if they're going to go to some form of education instead of deducation, and you teach them about sovereignty and free will and the natural loving kindness that we would want to navigate with around each other, and that we value each other's, you know, space and the sovereignty of others, and we talk about our freedom, our free will, and how we navigate together so that we can have joy and co-create in excitement, with all the things that, you know, younglings are totally into. Oh, you want to do it together? If that was part of the metric, and they talked, and most of the teachings would all be based on how beautiful nature is and how we can learn and how it can inform us, and we would actually do that with our children, well, we wouldn't have gotten ourselves anywhere close into the mayhem and chaos that we are finding ourselves in as a global civilization, purely because if you teach children about their sovereignty, they're never going to have a job at Macca's. They're never going to, people are not going to pay their taxes. They realize it's all a big scam. It's all a big programmed cult, really, of socially engineered belief systems. And what has been missing, and this is something where, of course, there's no benefit in remaining a victim on becoming aware of all of this. And so we are each sovereign ourselves, and so we can take the responsibility ourselves to awaken ourselves from this dream spell, to let go of it, and to step out of it. But without a roadmap, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
If you've only been taught the language of entropy, if you've only been operating on the programming of scarcity and what it is, trauma-based mind control on subtle or even very grave levels, you're going to be either obedient and you're going to fear stepping out of line, and you're going to just want to play along because, it's not that bad and I kind of get the good things and look at what I do have. But when you really ask people in, it's like, where is their little place where they live? Is that really ideal? Is that actually really what they want? We all have dream seeds within us, and that are more nature connected and more nature based and more natural. And so these people that are kind of stuck in that, all they really miss is the languaging. Because I've just talked about all this entropic mindset, but then there's the syntropic mind song and the language of syntropy and languaging around how nature actually functions, how life in its entirety, and we are part of life. This is not some like new philosophical kind of like an ideology. This is how planet Earth, like Earth, our home as an ecosystem, operates on natural occurring strategies that it's wired for, and it repeats successfully, continuously, all the time. And if we leave nature untouched, it will reforest the entire planet by itself. And so, yeah, we may still have some desert areas, but when we step back from our interference patterns, then nature will do a lot to restore, and that's just natural. It's not trying. That's what it's wired for. But that's what all life is wired for. And so what I've done is taken syntropic agroforestry from the external into the internal, and simply by engaging in syntropic agroforestry, people are going to end up having a syntropic minds orientation. And yet I find that there's not a lot of people on the earth that are, in my awareness, really versed in syntropy, and then also applying that to human ecology. They do talk about we are life, and we are part of nature, but it was my teacher, Patricia Faz, that spoke so beautifully when I was still stuck in my limited belief systems. And she said to me, she said, "You'd be surprised if you really look into it, that you and the tree are not so much different at all." And I was just like, okay. And she phrased it so nicely. She wasn't telling me, she wasn't instructing me. She just, placed a curiosity with me. And so I went into that for almost a year and a half, like really intensely. And we are nature, we are life, and we are syntropically wired. It's just that our programming is entropically cast over us. And through that, we have gotten stuck in the misuse and the overuse of our intelligence, because we have to protect ourselves from a lack of security. And that has all been foundationally in our civilization, been socially engineered to be exactly that. It's an entire Luciferic globalist agenda. And that's because there is a disease that has come into our planetary system. And that has very much to do with humans with humans no longer processing their feelings properly. And this could have very easily been a huge cataclysmic event, call it a comet coming in from space, and traumatizing, shocking the living bejeevers out of humans, and them not processing that experience properly. And that then slowly starts calcifying and building up, because then there's separation. Then it's like, well, I feel vulnerable, but I don't know how to process this. And when we start forgetting how to properly process our feelings, we started losing our bonds with so much more. And what that then did, it caused us to seek security and safety from these events, potentially, which then led from, safety of a cave while sleeping under the trees. It went into, creating structures, and then creating townships, and then but then bandits would come and raid our townships, and so now we need to build walls, and it's a mind virus. That's really what it is. It's we, and and there's nothing negative in that. We can just look through time, that there's been all these successions where we've progressively, and we can just witness that. We can see that humanity right now is at the peak of disconnection from nature. And that's not necessarily you and I, but if we look at our global impact on the planet, which is, phenomenal, we can see and we can witness, like, wow, 150 years ago or 200 years ago in the Midwest in America, and in the beginnings of, townships starting in Australia, there was still a lot of tending the land and working with the land, and getting the trees to timber them up, but it became an industrial mindset. And so when we're in an industrial mindset, we're disconnected from nature so much that we think that we justify that we can just take, and it will somehow, be better for us. We've become isolated into our own selves to just look out for our immediate nuclear family, and we're no longer in connection what any of our purchases really mean on a global level. And as I recognized through Syntropy and relating to Syntropy, or through Syntropy to life, what I really recognized is that there's no good or bad in the universe. Everything is performing a function with purpose, because these computers that we made, they come from the earth. This technology and the internet that we have, it's all consciousness. It's all part of life. It's just, how do we use it? And what function is it performing? Well, currently, we are further removed than humanity has ever been from living in harmony with nature. And at the same time, the further you remove a human being from its own nature, the stronger the pull becomes, because our nature is never going to change. Our blueprint is our blueprint. So we're at the same time at the greatest awakening on planet Earth into planetary consciousness, into nature-based preservation, restoration, regeneration. And to be alive during this time is just epically phenomenal. But Syntropy, to me, in how I relate to it, because it ties in life in us, outside of ourselves, it ties in our human ecology, our social makeup, our economic makeup. If we only navigate it with life and put the environment as the informing agent of all of our decision making, well, that is the syntropic orientation, because then you are operating on how life strategies are wired, and you're following that. And as I said, that's what we haven't been taught. And that's for us now a possibility to remember. And I don't want to sound as if I found, like, the Holy Grail, but I haven't found anything that actually can basically explain through direct observation any experience out there and any experience in here, because it's based on nature. I haven't met any philosophical understandings that, all the philosophical understandings that I have studied have just segregated up. It's more of this industrial mindset, separation, labeling, boxing, sticking name tags on all sorts of isms. And life doesn't work like that. We've learned a lot, I guess, through the observation of all the biology, and we've named a whole bunch of things, but it was never allowed to prosper, because the fantasy powers that be, Davos, the globalists, they have absorbed this mind virus and made it, they are devoted to this sickness. And that's not necessarily bad, because that's performing a function with purpose. What they are doing is giving humanity on a collective soul level, on a consciousness level, a springboard opportunity. They're pushing everybody up against the wall and to say, are you hearing me? It's time to call back our soul. It's time to call back our connection to the soil. It's time to call back our connection to the seeds that we plant in that soil that connect our soul back to the earth. That's what they are doing. They are disconnecting and removing us by all these different ways and means in so many ways over so many generations, that the calling that basically is to invocate is for us to remember our sovereignty and our stance with life. And so when we can view it in that way, because the syntropic orientation just allows us to start questioning the function of everything, because that's what life is doing, we can see that these humans, these globalists, are also life. They're not separate. They're not robots. And if they were robots, humans created, invented those robots. So everything is interconnected. And so this time is a tremendous opportunity, but without the languaging and without these comprehensions, a lot of people will be seeking out solutions that may best be put as healthy coping mechanism. And so what we are, in my observation, at a sort of crossroads in our human ecology is that we require a radical reassessment of our human ecology, a radical reflection on every aspect of our lives. But that can trigger, our entire internal ecosystem to get totally destabilized. And that is, again, why Syntropy for me is the missing link, because it is love language. It is reaffirmation. It's a reassurance on the intrinsic knowings. As I said, this is not a new philosophy. These are knowings that we carry inside of ourselves. And when they come out, and when they are heard, our cells say, yes, this is truth. And how do we know that it's truth? Because truth is just a label. It's because it feels to be resonating. And so when we start sharing this regenerative mindset, this restorative relating with others, I feel that many will be able to re-enable themselves very, very quickly. And I think we have a whole lifetime to work on that. And if it's required that we get even pushed more further, then that's just performing a function to wake us up even deeper, or maybe to wake those up that are still so thoroughly in the matrix.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Beautiful, man. Thanks for sharing. It really resonates and sits really nicely in my cells, in my heart. And I just had a moment this morning, small story. I was doing some mulching, big pile of mulch. I was moving, just getting in there under between the trees, and I'm here in the tropics, getting really hot and sweaty. And I thought after I got all the mulch down, I would get the hose on and start watering the trees. And the next minute, I had that same thought of what you just shared. I was like, I'm not much different to the trees. And I started watering myself with the hose, standing right next to the tree. And it was just such a beautiful moment. But I really resonate with what you say, and you've shared this, and you articulate it so well in the way that words are really governing our consciousness, and the way that we articulate our experience through our way of sharing our feelings really helps to navigate and direct our lives in certain ways, and shifting the words that we choose to use can really help to shift our lives. And I've got it, after listening and digesting all of that wonderful just truth, I feel really curious as to your suggestions or perspectives on shifting through and out of and disconnecting from the matrix and from the normal societal norms for people who are finding themselves now here in Australia. Things are going back to so-called normal as the old mind, old paradigm, the kind of back in the system. And what is it like? What does it take for an individual or communities now which are emerging more? More people are waking up, more people are dropping into their conscious awareness and choosing to take responsibility and realizing that we've been stripped of our sovereignty and of our free will, reclaiming our identities as human beings and our reclaiming our lives, essentially. What does it look like to move forward, and how do we cultivate strong connections with these people? I guess you're already doing it with these conversations and an open platform where people can be heard and be seen and share their truth as well. But my curiosity is and what I would really be inspired by is ways that we can continue to at foremost as an individual continue to go down that path, but also as a collective family and community and with others. What does it look like? Because you're someone that I really look up to and admire in the way that you exemplify through your life, everything that you speak about. So I'm just curious into what your suggestions would be moving forward in these times.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. For me, what comes up is symbiosis and mimicking nature. Nature already knows how to live in abundance and how to create abundance. You take one tomato seed you planted, you get, let's say you get 10 tomatoes because you planted it in a pot. You cut those tomatoes up and you take all the seeds out and you plant all those tomato seeds. But you could be feeding the entire village, but you can't do it in the pot. You actually have to, take those seeds and put them in a larger piece of ground. So nature is entirely wired for abundance. And so our design systems, with our intellect, with our divine intelligence, we're really benefiting, mimicking our societal orientations. And it's a really delicate place because we can only do this within on an individual level. But, and from that place, from the internal transformation, the external experience of our reality, when we drop the fear, when we process everything that is actually trauma that keeps us in fear, when we start navigating through that feeling-based relating as one way to shift ourselves out of fear and entropic orientations, we are able to start implementing right at the same time systems of abundance. And there's no better form than to create a sense of sovereignty for self to grow your own food. It is that quote unquote revolutionary material that is still of tremendous value, because when we garden and grow our own food, it's not just like, it's shifting the model. So currently we have a mind model and it always has the economy on the top. Money sits right there. And so the idea is not to replace that money, that model of money, and saying, well, if I grow food, then I don't have to spend that money. Because if we grow food, there's so much more that happens. We actually have therapy with the earth. We have therapy with ourselves. We get microbes and they come into our body and we feel, all sorts of beautiful biochemicals being released and we become relaxed. And so, and then we start doing it together and it becomes even nicer. But then currently we're in that space in between where it's like, how do you make that jump? Well, in syntropic agroforestry, everything works in succession. So the way that nature works best is if you planned out a 2-year system, is that you already harvest after 30 days your rockets and your little radishes and your lettuces are coming out. But as they leave the system, they create the room for the other plants that you also plant. You planted jackfruits, you planted eucalypt, you planted all sorts of trees, timber, and so everything that's in that system is kind of following one after the next. And that requires some quality intelligence to know how life, what life's duration of each species is. But in our human experience, we also operate on succession. We are a baby, then we are a youngling, and then we come into this, strange period where all these hormones, that's the next succession. Then all of a sudden the hormones come on and our sexual organs start really developing. And then we're coming into more maturity. And then we're actually psychologically and emotionally kind of ready to procreate again. And then we raise the next generation of younglings. And a good thing is that we're not like tomatoes and, a man plants his seed and you get 15 children. And so there's a beautiful governance that is it's so divinely a part of our species kind. But then we become older and our children grow up, and then we go into the later stage of our lives where we've gone through our shine and our manifestations and our creations, and we just kind of through all the experiences are able to kind of more, you know, that's where the fantasy of a pension maybe comes in, where people can just kind of relax. And it's not a bad concept. It's just that it's hijacked all the time by, you know, hedge fund investors. So there are these natural successions. But in an agroforest, it is very relevant for the farmer to, if you want to, like, nature can't prune itself. And so if you don't take that lettuce out of the garden, it's going to go to seed. If you're going to go to seed, it's going to be communicating with the plants around itself, like, hey, I'm slowing down. I'm checking out. I'm no longer really going to be doing much. I'm making seed for the next generation. What that actually does from observation, it slows down the growth of the other plants in that ecosystem. And so what we as humans have on the internal landscape, in our internal agroforest, on our farm, so to speak, our syntropic farm, because it's a syntropic farm, there's a tremendous amount of unresolved elements there, call it trauma. And they are pictures of experiences. And those experiences are still in our ecosystem. And so without clearing that debris with love for the greater ecosystem, our growth wants to grow, but it can't really break through, because what? All this cult programming sitting in the way. It's sitting in our internal mindset. It's occupying all this space. And it's about finding where those overgrowing and overbearing narratives, as in, like, maybe not fruit-bearing trees. You know, we have been trained into kind of like a slave-based mentality and taken out of our sovereignty-based mentalities. And so there's a lot of belief systems that, as like species of domination, guilt, fear, shame, these are all identifiable feelings and emotions that people have that really crowd out our ability to thrive. And so in my experience, what really benefits humans is, A, they have to make a willful decision. If they want to re-enable their nature, they want to get out of all this entropic, fear-based, because it's not fulfilling. And no matter how many Netflix episodes they watch of something, something is still, they're looking outside of themselves for something that they can only find within. And we know all of this, but then we have to be willing to make a choice and to say, I'm willing to re-enable my nature. I'm willing to reclaim my sovereignty. And then a hero's journey can begin. And very shortly, when the hero leaves his familiar ecosystem, he goes on a path where new experiences come in. And when we see that we can go on a journey, we will always come back to our own farm, our own home, our own land, our own beingness as a human being, and with that, our internal agroforest. And so we don't necessarily have to go travel around the world. That hero's journey can be done within as well. And what a farmer would do if he neglects his farm for, let's say, 5 years, and everything is overgrown, and there's so-called weeds everywhere, and there's like new tree species popping up, and the mango trees that he hadn't pruned for years are they're all over the place. In order to get nature back into production and productivity, which is a natural activity of life. Life is fully productive all the time. We've taken productivity into an industrial sort of factory kind of setting, and we're now talking about working and being productive, and it's all tied into that monetary narrative. But nature is highly productive as well, but it does it out of love. In order for that agroforest to become productive again, the farmer needs to prune. The farmer needs to cull and clear the vines that are overgrowing the beautiful little sapling trees. He needs to use his consciousness to change the infrastructure and the layout, and he needs to start planting new seeds.
Yeah.
And that's something where it's a twofold process. We have to clear and cull shit out of our lives that actually doesn't serve us. because it's holding us back, and we are aware of those patterns. So that's where the will comes in, which is the sovereign aspect of, that's our sovereignty as the most pinpoint prick of who we are, is our will, because it's either yay or nay. It either feels good or it doesn't feel good. You're either willing or you're not willing. But because we've been traumatized, a lot of people do a lot of things that they're actually not willing to do, but they're doing it because if they don't do it, that will be more painful. And so we're doing this, pain and pleasure narrative, like, well, I'll do it because if I do it that way, then. So we have to start recultivating our will, and being willing to radically reassess our lives, reassess our friends, reassess our business, reassess our ways of income generation, and be willing to witness what comes up with all the fear of even imagining, like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to quit my job today, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to change my life. You want to have a support network. If you want to make those changes, we are social creatures. To navigate this solo as a hero's journey, on the hero's journey, there's always other humans there. There's the guides, there's the supporters, there's all of these people. And so it's a twofold process where you have to clear and cull in your agroforest anything that is actually just, it's actually not making you happy, and it's actually kind of distracting your time availability and your presence away from the seeds you could be planting. And so we need to, this is why I call for a radical human ecology. We need to radically shift our orientation and start focusing on what we want to create for ourselves in alignment with life's natural strategies, that is abundance, prosperity, happiness, joy. And in the same timing, we need to make room for those seeds and that consciousness orientation to have room to sprout out. Because if we still have all these belief systems about I need to, if I don't do it, then, if we don't start apprehending those thoughts and actually making use of them, because those thoughts are just performing a function with purpose. If we don't do that, then those new seeds are not going to be able to grow. So it's dreaming the world that we want to be in, and then being willing to make the changes in that internal landscape. And maybe for some people, you just have to go through your friend list. Like I did it years ago. I went through my friend list, and there were 7 dead people on my phone. Like that was representative of my contacts that were in my, we are all connected. Just because they're contacts in a phone doesn't mean that, no, they're my connections to my physical and my spirit and soul. And I had like 2,000 contacts in there, and how many were really relevant? We're sold on this fantasy in Facebook land that it's all about having as many friends as possible. And I'm so happy when I hear people, because I have 5,000 friends, and it's an annoyance because we cannot maintain that many relationships. It's absolutely impossible. It's not even healthy. That means having 5,000, plant species in your backyard, all competing for the farmer's attention. You can't manage that much. It's impossible. And so I went through a process of really radically assessing, like, who is making me grow? Who do I feel attracted to be around because they're serving my growth, my ability to become more authentically embodied in who I am, and they're there to listen to me when I want to process what is happening for me. Are your friends there for you to receive you and not give you advice how to fix your situation, or tell you, mate, she'll be all right, just go back to work, mate, and we'll have a couple of studies up. So it's assessing your context, your social ecology, and really just trimming it down. Because this is about your soul's journey. This is about your hero's journey. This is about my hero's journey. And when we do that, we start, the world, all of a sudden, a room opens up. And we meet people that we wouldn't have met otherwise, because we didn't make a conscious choice to want to start planting new seeds. And we don't know what those relationships are. But when you create the gap, life will fill it. That happens everywhere in nature. If a gap is created, life will fill the gap. And when we create a gap, a space in our lives by culling out things that aren't actually really there to elevate us, but kind of like keep us from. These people are going through similar experiences, but if somebody else radically shifts themselves, they kind of want them to stay the same. You know, they're like, no, 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 don't change, because I have this relationship with you in this way. And that's what keeping a lot of humans sort of stuck in old relationships that kind of are nice. But is it really building you up? Is it really allowing you to become more authentically who you came here to be? These are the real questions that each individual benefits asking, and get rid of. Yeah, and it's not, you don't have to like discard them, but it's just start focusing on who you want to hang out with, and be really real. That when these connections still call you in to go for a night on the piss, come on, Stewie, it'll be fun. I had to get really real and say, you know, where I want to put my energy and my time is really in people that I can deeply relate around trauma with. Well, that sorted out 50 people right there. They're like, mate, trauma. Like, what are you talking about? What's that anyways? Can you eat that? And so, you know, because I had an overload of social connections, but it's about really like making that choice, but really standing in that, really holding that ground as the farmer, as the steward of your future. Don't let those, you know, older relationships that are like drag boats or drag nets still catching, just cut it clean. It's okay, because you're not responsible for their journey. You're responsible for yours. And when you do that out of loving kindness, then I see that we can very quickly change our economic ways of income generating, because we cannot have new ideas if our mind is filled with old entropic ideas.
Yeah.
And so that's where I sense that it is going in the layer underneath the systems we can design, so that when the designer recalibrates that from which he designs, then the external manifestations of our creations will be in alignment with nature and life, and we will start regenerating. But there's a lot to this. Like really, it's and that is our time. You know, I can say, well, it's really challenging. It's like, no, this is ours to do, and we either want to do that or not, and that's a choice. And that choice can only be made by each individual, and meeting up with friends that also want to do that. That's probably key. So what I see emerging just from a for feeling place is we're going to have a separation of the wheat and the chaff. We're going to have those beings that want to go into sovereign communities. They want to thrive together, live together, and work through the problems of whatever emerges. And then you have the people that actually keep the society going. Because you and I could just tune out of society entirely and find our unique way, find some land and somehow dream it into being that we could do that, while we can still fuel our cars with petrol. Because there's plenty of people that didn't. Everybody has come here with a talent and a gift and a purpose. And not everybody here on the planet has come here to re-enable their nature. Like every soul has its own journey. And so there are going to be plenty of people that are going to keep a system going long enough for us to start focusing on creating the new. And when we do that, more and more people will want to come in. But we're going to have healing centers. We're going to have transition places for people to detox from a very sick and very intoxicated mind orientation that they have lived with all of their life, that has never felt natural, never been natural, and never will be actually natural. So this is a deep topic. There's no simple solutions, and yet the solutions are super, super simple. Make the choice. Start making your changes in your own life. Don't try and change the world. Change your standing in the world, and the world around you will change.